So, welcome back to Jim Bob's Garden. So today, what I'm going to do is I am redoing my compost bin. I had used logs, and the logs were great, but there was a couple of issues. One, basically it made boxes. Because I had to stack the logs up, I ended up with boxes where I ended up having to shovel down and in, and I had to step over. It was kind of a pain. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use concrete blocks, and we're going to make it a U, kind of like what you guys see laid out here. So the other advantage to concrete block is it will last essentially forever. It'll probably last longer than I will if I build it well. So first thing you want to do, in my opinion, is to kind of lay your thing or get a good idea of what you want. All right, and then you want to get some sand. Now the reason I say sand is because it's a lot easier to level if you got some sand, and the sand isn't going to hurt your compost any. Eventually it'll all get saturated with the juices from the compost and such. But once you kind of figure out where you want it, how big you want it, then I would level it all out with some sand. Now if you can look over here, you can see this is not level here, and I got a dip right there. So I'm going to do some moving around. And again, this is part of the reason why I've got sand. I did soak this sand down real good because it was very dry. And by doing that, it made it a little more solid so that it doesn't shift around as much. So I got a hump here, so what I'm going to do is drag some of that down to where my back wall is level. Now, does it have to be level? No. I'm going to reinforce this with some rebar. But if it starts off level, it's going to have much less of a tendency to tip later on. So I highly recommend at least being somewhat level. If you got a small slope, that's fine. The one thing I would say is probably don't build your back wall to where it's leaning. All right. Obviously, if it leans, it's going to want to tip over. So once you get it somewhat level, then you can kind of scope it out, see where you're at. I know I had a hill right there and a dip right here, so I'm going to drag some more over here. And again, that is one of the advantages of having sand, is it's a lot easier to do that than with hard dirt. I'm just going to kind of stomp it down a little bit. Now, I'm on a slope here, and so one of the things I did, Bree, if you want to bring that camera over here, let me kind of show you. All right, so because I'm on a slope, you should be able to get it from there. What I did is I reinforced it with some logs and then piled the sand up in the corner to try and get somewhat of a level spot in this back corner. I wasn't sure how far back I would end up going, so I wanted to get a good chunk of basically lift back here in this corner, because it's eventually going to start washing away. But hopefully, if we do this right and we get enough, then what will happen is it will wash away, but not as much. I've got a log back here, a couple of logs there, and they can sit there forever and just rot down. And by that time, this will have solidified into a real nice, decent platform, hopefully. But what's also going to happen is I'm not going to have as much weight back here, and I'm going to have about a foot or two of this slope that will be on either side of it, so that hopefully it will not shift on me. But I'm also going to reinforce it some. Now, I'm not concreting these together, and part of the reason for that is just in case things do start to tip or slope, I can always take it apart and rebuild it. All right, so that being said, go ahead and start putting this back. And we'll see how we're looking. Looks a bit better. Oh yeah, much better. Now there's a lot of plans online for how to set up a compost bin. But nobody, well, let me change that. How to set up concrete block compost bin. But I didn't see a lot of people actually doing it. So that's part of what I'm trying to do here, is actually show you the procedures for actually doing it as I play with my microphone. All right. Highly recommend gloves unless you get real tough hands. All right, and then when you're setting up your corners, you want these corners in particular to be flush. Because what we're going to do is we're going to be setting concrete blocks on top of this to tie the back wall to the sides. All right, we'll see that here in a second. Well, essentially I can do that now, I guess. That's what's going to happen. This is going to sit here. And by setting that like so, what will happen is now any tipping, it's going to have a hard time tipping back because this ties it to the blocks that are going this way. All right, and then of course it'll stack up as we go along. So let me work on this one. Now, because you got sand, it's a lot easier to adjust. And you can just do it with your hands to get it where you want it. And then just kind of press down a little bit or wiggle it. You don't want it sinking in too much. It's going to sink some because it's concrete block. What's going to end up happening, because it's hollow in the middle, you're going to have some sinkage. All right, that's just natural. But once again, the idea of these blocks stacking on each other is that it will tie everything together. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to drive some reinforcements down into the middle. All right, so one of the things I'm doing, you'll notice here on these blocks here and that block there, they're flush. And that's because I want to do this, where I'm tying the back wall to the front wall, which should help keep it from tipping because you've got weight this way. And if I have any tipping, it's going to be back that direction, all right? Which is not something we want to do. So, just like so. There you go, perfect. All right, and this one, is that going to sit? No, I need to dig that one down a little bit more. Yeah. All right. Now, ideally, what I got right now, see that tip? That means this block is sitting up a little too high. So you really don't want that. So you can kind of wiggle things to kind of dig it down a little lower to where you're more flush. And that will sit on there nice and flat, hopefully. Still not quite there. Oh, actually, I need to go up. That's why. Okay. All right. Now, along this black wall, because I'm doing this, what I could do is pull this apart and try and put something in between. But one of the things about compost is compost likes to have air. You got to get some oxygen into your compost. So this is actually cool. Works out good for me because what I want is some slots that air can come into. Compost will build up in there over time and it'll be fine. So that's the general layout. So with that being said, I'm going to get to building and then we'll show you the next step. All right, so I got my second layer on, and you'll notice, like I said, the corners all overlap that back wall. This overlaps the back wall, and then in between here, I've just used the 2-finger guide. So basically, I'm going 2 fingers apart right now. I may decide to spread the top a little bit further apart. We're going to see how it looks once I start working on the third layer. All right, but this is the beginning. This is what it's going to look like. Now, one of the things I'm going to do, and I'll show you this here in a little bit, is I'm going to pound rebar into some of these to keep it from slanting. All right, so if you're going to do that, you kind of got to get an idea of how high you want it. All right, so putting that third block on, once again, make sure you tie the corners together. All right, so once you put that third block on, it's about this high. So you're not even to 3 foot yet. I am going to do at least one more layer. So, but once you start pounding that rebar, the thing is, you don't want to be pounding on a rebar that's sitting right here and then end up hitting your block and cracking your block and having to buy another block. So you want to do your rebar ahead of time and then set the last row of blocks down onto the rebar with, about, a few inches of the rebar still sticking up so you don't take a chance of hitting your blocks. All right, with that, let me get some more work done and I'll check back with you in a few minutes. All right, so now what we're doing is we're going to cut our reinforcing rebar, which is what we're going to pound down into the ground and use that to hold the concrete blocks in place. I've already cut one 5 foot long. It's cheaper to buy them. You can buy them 4 foot long. I didn't figure that was long enough. Plus, it was cheaper to buy one 10-foot piece. Probably could have bought a 12-foot piece cheaper, but it didn't fit in my Buick. So then we take our tool and we cut them in half. Now, if you're going to do this with power tools, make sure that you have on eye protection. Probably should have hearing protection and gloves. The ends will get hot. All right, just so as you knows. There. There you go. Keep in mind, the ends will be hot for a bit, so we're going to let them set, and then we're going to head back over to finishing up the rest of the blocks. Okay, so we got our third layer up, and now what I'm looking at is start doing the reinforcing. Like I said, you don't want to do this at the last minute, because if you do it after the next layer's on, then essentially what's going to end up happening, you're going to be pounding down really close to your blocks, and you don't want to bust up your blocks. These blocks will crack if you hit them right. So I've got it right up in the corner as much as possible on this corner block here. So then what we're going to do is we're going to pound it down to where it goes pretty deep. That's why I've got a 5-foot long block, pole. And I want to leave enough up above where it's still going to hold my other block. So we're looking at 1.5 fist. We need to go down a little bit more. There we go. That should be fine. All right, so now if this does start to lean, I've got this here to help reinforce it. This is rebar. This was about, I want to say $6, 6.5 for a 10-foot piece. And again, I want to do my corners here where the whole thing is tied together. Now, if you have really sandy soil like me, you're probably going to want to figure on it going down. I mean, you want at least 3 foot of it, 2 to 3 foot of it in the dirt. I mean, you want it to go down deep, otherwise it's not going to hold anything. It's just going to fall over with the blocks. Deeper. Right, here we go. Should be fine. So I'm going to get all 4 of these areas where I have the corners, where I've got this stack tied in with this stack. So like I said, it helps to tie it together. And hopefully we'll keep it from falling down the hill. Oh no. Alright, so run into a problem. Got a root. So now my recommendation, you can keep it there and cut it off, but I don't feel comfortable that it's down deep enough. So we're going to go into a different spot. Oh, maybe I can't go to a different spot. Freaking deer flies. I hate deer flies. Deer flies suck. Alright. So that's my 4. I'm going to go ahead and tie these right here together. And I may decide later on to put some more reinforcement in here. Kind of just depends on how I'm feeling and whether or not I want to spend the money. Alright, so I would kind of like to have one there and there. But this should be fine. Alright. Everything all snuggled up nice and snug as a bug in a rug. Should I do it there? Should I do it there? Tie these together. Getting tired, folks. Man, you come around me, Mr. Fly. We get these deer fly around here. Oh, shit. See, that's what I don't want to do. I don't like that. But that's is what it is. All right. So now we just lay the top layer on. And once again, we're going to go across from where we were before. That one's going to go right there. And then I'll go ahead and finish this up, and I'll show you what the end result is. All right, so the last layer is on. Everything's got gaps, so air can come in. Now, pretty much I'm done at this point, with the exception of a couple of things I want to note. One, you got a lot of cavities in here. So now these cavities could end up filling up with snakes, spiders, and whatnot, so it's kind of up to you. One of the things you can do, if you're of a mind to do so, is you can cover these with either wood, or you can cover them. They actually make a concrete block size capstone, essentially, to set across these if you want to do so. That's entirely up to you. You can also fill it with dirt, which is what I may end up doing, where I'm going to see how bad it is and kind of what ends up happening. But I might fill it with dirt. I might fill it with compost. I don't know yet. But as it stands, the structure is built, and so now I can start throwing in my compost. And the idea will be, we will start at one end, and that will be the beginning compost. And then when I feel like it's doing a pretty good job, then I'll take it and I'll shovel it over to the other end to turn the pile and to move it down and to create a new pile over here. And then we'll do the second pile into the third one for the last final stage of composting. And then we'll move the first pile to the second, and then the first pile we will start again. So that's how it's all going to work. I don't know if I'll start at this end and work my way that way or the other way around. We'll kind of see. You could also, there are half blocks. If you were of a mind to do so, you could put the half blocks on, and you can make it extend all the way out flush to where your wall comes out completely snug. You could also use the half blocks so that you didn't leave the gaps, but I want the gaps because I want air to be able to circulate into and around my compost. If compost doesn't get air, it doesn't really do as well on the composting. All right. You could also take it up another level if you wanted to. I think that's high enough for me. Your average pile needs to be about 3 foot tall. It's not quite 3 foot here, but of course it will mound in the middle. It is 3 foot wide, so I haven't really measured it. Let me see. Well, let's measure. 1 second. So this is actually right at about 30 inches. Yeah, 30 inches tall as it stands right now. So if I wanted to put another block up, that would bring it up to 37 and a half, thereabouts, 38 inches tall, which I could do. I can also extend it out if I want to do so. Simple process. All I got to do is just add a block and then stack them back up, and I can make this deeper. I can also, if I wanted to, take it a little further out this direction, fill in and add another section onto it, though that'd be a little more complicated. I'd have to deconstruct a little bit here, but again, completely doable. I like the idea. I had 2 before, and I really like the idea of having 3 compost bins now. So that's what I got. Is this the only way to make a compost bin? No, not even close. But this is probably the most permanent. Everything else can rot down. Any kind of wood can rot down. Even if you use metal fencing, it gets old and starts to sag and gets a little messy. This isn't going to go anywhere. Okay, so total cost is right at $110. There are 70 blocks in this, and I bought 3 pieces of 10-foot rebar. All right, I believe it's the 1/2-inch rebar. So, like I said, all told, right at 110 plus or minus a few, including taxes, minus my discount for being military. So that's how I built my compost bin. Like I said, I really like the idea of having 3 spots now versus 2. It's 30 inches tall, but you know, once you mount it up, it'll be up over 3 foot tall. Do you have to do it this way? No, by any means. I mean, you can do any way you want. You can stack up compost in a big pile in the middle of your yard, and it'll compost down as long as you get it tall enough and wide enough. It's not a problem. A million different ways to make a compost bin. I like this. I think it's neat, it's clean, and it's a lot more permanent than some of the other options. All right, thanks once again for stopping by. Let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Grow something.